Okay, it's 6:30. Can I have a mover and seconder to bring this meeting to order? Coghlan and Austin. That the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of November 15th, 2017 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. So I'd asked you if you're able to stand for the national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please remain standing for a moment for private prayer or reflection. Please be seated. And I'll turn to council. Does anybody have a disclosure of pecuniary interest on any of the matters on tonight's agenda? Seeing none now, if something does pop up, just mention it at that time and we'll make note of it. So tonight we have a delegation from Hospice Huronia requesting support. And so I invite Joanne to come forward and present us with the information you want to tell us about. And just have a seat.
Okay.
Yeah, you can sit down. Actually, kind of pull both mics towards you. It's easier because we do stream this meeting live, and so we want everybody to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting me to this opportunity. I really appreciate that. Before we begin, I just want to make sure everybody has the same background on Hospice Huronia, because not a lot of people know about Hospice Huronia. Hospice Simcoe is it's been around a lot longer, and it's a residential hospice, so there's a lot more stories. Hospice Huronia has been around for just over 24 years, so since 1993, we've had volunteers working and providing in-home volunteer visiting services, hospice services, and we also provide bereavement support one-on-one and in groups. So we've been doing that since 1993. And right now we are moving on, and we are in the midst of building capital in order to build our residential hospice, and we plan on being operational for December 2018. So, is this clicker? Am I pointing? Got it, I got it. So, I'm sure most of you have learned what a hospice is through Hospice Simcoe, and just to make sure everybody is on the same page, it's a home-like setting. It's not an institutional setting at all. It's very much like a home for our residents that will be there. It's a place that has kitchens and family areas. It's a place that's warm and welcoming. It's calm. It's not noisy. There's no intercoms. So it's not a bustling place like a hospital. It's a place of comfort, care, and compassion and it gives our residents and their families a chance to say goodbye, to share memories, stories, to laugh, and to cry and say goodbye. And there is no charge for our services. Whoops. Skipped a couple here. I'm going to go back because it's gone way up. So I have a couple of pictures just of Hospice Simcoe to give you an idea of what our hospice will be like. We have one of our board members is the executive director of Hospice Simcoe. Our current executive director was executive director of Hospice Simcoe. So we have lots of knowledge as far as what it will be like in the end. We will be having an outdoor area. You can see here they have a patio. You can see the warm, welcoming kitchen, and there's a library there. It's a small area for people to have conferences, to have some quiet time called Doctor's Family and just have a few moments of peace. You can see here that they often have some entertainment come in. Local musicians and people will come in and just provide quiet musical gifts, that type of thing. Bird feeders for all the windows. Our hospice that we have, it's on 3.1 acres, and it backs onto trails that people will be able to take advantage of. And here, that's Claire, the snowman with a bedpan for a hat. So hospice is a place for living and living really well and as well as you can right up until your last moment. It's not a place where there's hustling and bustling. It is a place where there's lots of comfort, care, and compassion. That's our drawing, our schematics of our design right now. It's in your packages so you can actually read what the rooms are. But the bulk of it is for the clients. It's 5 client rooms, 1 spare room at the moment, and a common room that will open up and show off into the forest there. There's a bathing room, and it will have a therapeutic tub in it, and which is usually really well loved and enjoyed by the residents. Lots of areas for common, for family and people to get together. We'll have a big boardroom for a training of our volunteers and for offering other services to our residents. And we have the administrative offices as well. And of course, the common kitchen and dining room and living rooms and that. Okay. So people say, well, what do we need a residential hospice for? And right now, one of the key things is that we need a local one. We need one that's close because most of our residents have to drive 45 minutes to get to Hospice Simcoe. And the thing is, that's only if there's a bed available. There is a shortage of hospice beds in Ontario. So we do need them because of that, and the need is growing. Our area has 3% above the national average of senior citizens, so unfortunately that means that the need will be growing. Because there's a shortage in beds, right now 52% of cancer patients are dying in acute care hospitals. So nobody chooses to die in a hospital. It's not the setting that you want to end your days in. And furthermore, a hospice it's a good alternative to hospitalization, let alone the whole atmosphere and the caring versus the curing and the peacefulness versus the hustling and bustling of a hospital. Financially, it costs $1,100 a day to run a hospital bed, and it costs $439 to run a hospice bed. So there's savings there by having hospice beds available, and it frees up more beds for patients in the hospital, and so it provides a really good alternative to hospitalization. Just so you know, I'm not here to request funding for operations. I'm asking for funding for our capital build, so that we have this opportunity to offer to Springwater residents from your north half of Springwater residents. We do have funds that are being provided once we are operational. 50% will be covered by the LIN, and the other 50% will be raised through immemorial donations, our special events, and third-party events. So we work with other hospices, and they've had no problem raising that. It's about $100,000 per bed that they have to raise each year, and that's not a concern. So what we are working with right now is building this residential hospice. So right now, we estimate that it will cost just over $3 million to build it, and that's considering that we've been given the land by the town of Penetanguishene, and we're just in the middle of finalizing that, so all the processes should be done by February for that. With the construction costs and soft costs, that's where that total comes from. We have had savings set aside, and we've been fundraising, so we've got about $600,000 now in capital commitments and funds that we've raised to date. And once we hit that $1 million mark, we can apply for capital funds that's been set aside specifically for hospices. And so that will be $200,000 per bed, which is where that $1 million comes from. So what we are still needing to raise is just over $1.5 million for the actual capital build of the building. So that's what we are requesting assistance in funding with. We are asking all of our municipalities to help us fund and to set some money aside in their budget for next year to go towards our capital build. And of course, it would all depend on the number of residents and the size of the community, that type of thing as well. So if you could put us in your budget, if you have any way to do that, and any amount that you consider fair, we would certainly appreciate that. And the other thing we're asking everyone here to do is to help spread the word about what we're doing and about our residential build, so that people will know that we're doing this and be thinking of us. Thank you for your time.
So I'll turn to council. Do you have some comments or questions on the presentation? Councillor Austin?
Thank you for the presentation, Joanne. I'm a strong supporter of Hospice Huronia. To council, I would think that when we get in our budget deliberations, that what we did this year was we found funding through the golf tournament funds, and I would anticipate that we do the same thing next year. I'm not sure if that's part of our budget deliberations or if it would be a separate motion, but we can decide that later.
No, you're right. Typically, we took things out of our budget and relegated it to the golf tournament and said it wasn't coming out of taxpayer money. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor Frank. Ms. Warren, you stated the ratio of seniors in the area. What geographic area were you talking about? Were you talking about Penetanguishene or Springwater?
It was, the statistics was for North Simcoe that I had read, that were 3% above the national average.
I'm sorry, what's the average?
I don't know, it's just that we're 3% above.
So we're 2%
3%
above the
above
provincial
the-
average with seniors living in Simcoe County, is that correct?
North Simcoe,
Thank you kindly.
yes. 3.
Other questions or comments? Okay, I guess I'll make a comment. I think from this, I can tell you now, I doubt if you'll see anything in our budget. We really do believe healthcare and it is the responsibility of the provincial government. We don't believe it's the responsibility of the local taxpayer. But I know at the county's involved with the Hospital Alliance. And I know there was roughly $500,000 set aside for all the hospice operations in Simcoe County. And I'm not sure if you're going to be one of the recipients of it or not. And the county funds to the Hospital Alliance is for capital projects. I think you might see us as a township, and as mentioned by Councillor Austin, as we go down the road, I have no issues if someone wants to table a resolution at some point that in addition to physician recruitment, which is part of our proceeds from the golf tournament, that we may very well want to add both the two hospice organizations as part of our ongoing support. And it would be very similar to what we did this year, and it's basically based on the ratio of beds or potential beds that you're going to, I think you're putting 5 in and Barrie has 10. And I think this year we donated 10,000 to Barrie and, or 5,000, yeah, 5,000 to Simcoe Hospice and 2,500 to Huronia Hospice.
2,000.
Was it 2,000?
5 and 2.
Yeah,
Okay,
And
there
it
I
was-
stand corrected.
very gratefully received.
Okay, so that's where the funding will come from. So I wouldn't want you to expect that, because we're going to be talking about the budget later tonight, and I think there'd be a move to get things out of the budget rather than me adding into it. And so I don't think there will be an opportunity there. But we do thank you, and hospice is very important. And we do believe that the provincial government, who collects a lot of tax dollars from all of us, should be putting more funds into those operations, because as you say, they're probably half the cost of a hospital operation, and they do provide special care for end-of-life experience. And I have a question on my own, though, because I brought this up at the county, so this isn't new. When it comes to MAD, as I call it, and that's what it is, medically assisted death. So where does your hospice kind of sit on that?
Well, without having a residential hospice in effect at
Right.
the moment, they don't have a policy, but it is a decision between the patient and their doctor.
Okay. Okay, anyway, I just found it counterproductive. We're putting millions in the hospitals, but at the same time, putting a needle in them to get rid of them sooner than later. But that's my opinion. That's not council's opinion. Yeah, so anyway, just wanted to pass that on. You can make comments if you care to.
And thank you, Mayor French. I would just like to reiterate that that is not the opinion of all members of council.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we need a mover and a seconder to accept the delegation. Coughlin and McConkey. That the delegation from Hospice Huronia be received. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we'll move on to adoption of previous minutes. So can I have a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor? Alan? Coughlin? And just going to read the minutes of council items 6.2 through to 6.6 be approved as presented. Any questions on any of these minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And can I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of boards, committees, and other organizations? Get it on the table. Coughlin. It's going to be a long meeting. And Alan. And of course, I'm going to read the minutes of boards, committees, and other organizations. Items 6.8 through to 6.11 be received as information. Any questions on any of these? Councillor Austin.
6.11, 6.11?
Is it just a comment or a question?
Question. Okay. I noticed in the policing committee meeting report that there's mention of the policing committee possibly disbanding in the near future, and I'm concerned about that, and I'm just wondering if our two representatives on that committee, council representatives, might be able to shed some light on it, or if there's a possible way of dealing with that problem.
Councillor Hanna, do you want to comment?
As a member of the committee, I can give you my views on it, but I'm not speaking necessarily for the committee. The committee is run, for the most part, by Bob Sporing, and he puts a lot of time in it. He looks after the radar monitoring, puts it out, does his own thing. We were down to, we didn't have a quorum a few months ago, so there was a problem with the meeting, and one of the people have now left. So basically, there's only two. A couple new people have come forward. An agreement was made to extend the policing committee to the end of the year, and I believe it's been revised now to extend it for 6 months to work in partnerships with the OPP to try to keep the committee going. Unfortunately, in my view, I think if Mr. Sporing was to move away from it, the committee would probably fold. So it's one of the few committees, actually, that does not receive any enumeration for its volunteers for being there. Councillor McConkey and I attend regularly, and I have to be honest with you, the major complaint is always just speeding, and we all know there's issues with speeding. There's not a lot we can do with it. I think people who attend get frustrated with that, but that's just the way it is. Everybody speeds everywhere except on their own street, right? So the committee, I think, is in a pattern now where if new residents don't step up, it'll probably end up folding.
Yes.
A follow-up question. I'm just wondering if there have been any attempts to kind of go public with possible recruitment. What attempts have been made to bring new people on board and to say replace Mr. Sporing after his many great years of service?
Councillor Hanna?
If you read my newsletters, you'll see that I put in there a number of times that there's need for volunteers in that committee. I don't know exactly what else is done, but I think the stuff on Facebook and that, and I think, I don't go on Twitter and I don't go on Facebook, but I think Councillor McConkey may be sharing some stuff with that as well. I don't know.
Councillor McConkey?
I believe it has been in the Springwater link when we were trying to move forward with it. It's something, again, thank you for reminding, maybe staff could take away and make sure that there's some more communication looking for that. But, yeah, it's trying to get the volunteers. I've actually had a couple people come out, they say, yeah, they want to join, and they basically will come for their issue and you don't see them stay. So it's either not what they really expected or they didn't want. And so, yeah, we need it. There's a need for safety in the community, I totally agree, but trying to get the people out.
Okay, good. And I know it has been in the Springwater link, and maybe we'll just repeat it and see if we can gather some interest from other parts of the township. But, okay. So any other questions on any of the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Question period. So we have 10 minutes here. If you're in the audience and you want to ask a question, we prefer them on something on the agenda, but we'll answer any question if we can, or tell you when we'll get back to you. And so I invite anybody forward that might have a question of council, and as I said, if we can answer it, we will. If not, we'll get back to you later. Okay. Yeah, we've had a dry spell. We need to get some more people out and ask questions, keep us hopping. Okay, let's move on to correspondence and information items. And I need a mover and a seconder to get it on the table. Coughlin McConkey. That correspondence and information items 8.2 to 8.6 be received as information. Any of these we'd like to comment on or ask questions on? Councillor Hanna?
I'd like to comment on 8.4, please.
Okay, any others? Okay, carry on, Councillor Hanna.
Thank you. 8.4 on the agenda, it's a suggestion about the widening of 400 Highway. I believe it's from 89 Highway up through to 11 through the Barrie area. And also they're asking in that report for comments, written comments by December the 8th. I would like this council to consider supporting comments and have staff maybe generate a response on our behalf. I believe widening the 400 Highway is a waste of time and money, given that if you take an interchange costs $60 million, maybe more. If we're going to be ripping down all the interchanges on that stretch of the 400 Highway, building new interchanges, it's going to be very expensive. And in the end, when we have storms and whiteouts in wintertime, instead of closing 6 lane highway, we'll be closing a 10 or 12 lane highway. So I would suggest that the better idea would be what they came up with a number of years ago, and it backed off from it. I believe it was the Liberal government that changed it, but they were going to extend 427 Highway from the Mississauga area, if you like, Brampton, up through to the Barrie area. Unfortunately, we're going to run between Midhurst and Barrie, which I think was a mistake. I think it should go all the way up to Horseshoe Valley Road. It would help Penetang, Midland, Collingwood, all those other places would benefit. And it would take all the traffic that's on the 400 Highway. The truck traffic would eliminate all that traffic coming from the airport area off the 400 Highway, and there would be an alternate route when the 400 Highway is closed. Given that big fire that was a few weeks ago on the 400 Highway, it wouldn't have mattered how many lanes there were there, the highway would have been closed. And as you know, the alternate routes there were like 11 Highway or people going over to 27 Highway. I've heard of people taking 6 hours to get back and forth to Toronto that day. So I would suggest, as I stated, by December the 8th, we generate some kind of a written correspondence asking the province to consider re-evaluating the option of extending 427 Highway versus widening the 400 Highway.
Can I suggest maybe the best way of dealing with it, if you'd like to put a notice of motion forward later, when we come to that point, and maybe we get a motion at the next council meeting, and by that time, maybe you can craft, what you think may be an appropriate response, and we can see if it's supported by council.
I'm happy to wordsmith something, but given that they want the response by December the 8th, I'm not sure if we'll have time between now and December the 8th. I don't think we have another council meeting before then, so we do? Oh, geez, I would have missed it. I won't be here, I don't think, so. Possibly, we could consider a motion tonight, if it doesn't have to be a notice of motion.
There would have to be a notice of motion, because we don't have, carry on. So what we'll do, we're going to pull that one, because we can turn that into a motion. So the rest of the information items are fine, are they? Okay, so the reworded resolution we're dealing with right now, that correspondence and information items 8.2 through to 8.6 be received as information, with the exception of item 8.4 to be introduced separately. All those in favor? Carried. And we'll wait for the clerk to scribe something here. Okay, here's the initial wording, and of course I'll need a mover and a seconder. That corresponds and information item 8.4 be received, and that comments of council be provided through the public commenting period to ACOM regarding the Highway 400 improvements, so it leaves it fairly open to work on some wordsmithing. Yes, Councillor Anna?
Can I add in there that they explore the options of extending the 427 highway? Because I believe the province already bought all that land, and they just backed off on finishing that roadway. So I'd like to, if we could, just add something in there that they take a look at expanding 427 highway, because if they got the letter the way it's written, they would think we're opposed to widening 400 highway. I'm suggesting instead of widening it by 4 more lanes, we consider building 427 highway.
I would think that could be in the content of our report, because that's why we left it pretty broad. So you put 427 extension, whatever you care to. So I think this will cover it, because we need your input, because it's obviously something you've spent a lot of time.
Thank you, as long as it's in the report,
Yes.
because I don't give our provincial officials enough credit sometimes, so thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor French. Hasn't this already begun substantially? It isn't, I see heavy equipment up and down Highway 400, and I thought this was well underway.
I don't believe that's the widening. I think that's putting the new barriers down the center of the 400 highway, so the people that like going through that don't do it as frequently.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a major bridge improvement, we know. That's right at the corner of 93 and 400, and that's been underway for a few years. But the fact that they're actually doing this consultation, theoretically, they don't have approval to move forward. So I don't think that, as Councillor Hanna said, I don't think that section has been approved for construction. I'm sure it's budgeted and all that, but I think that's why they're taking the input at this particular point. So yes, it's appropriate, and we'll see what we come up with, and we'll see if the kind of report and that is endorsed by council or not. And we'd send it off, and we would have enough time to do that. So, are you the mover of this, Councillor Anna? Can I have a seconder? Councillor McConkey. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to action reports. And the first one is 9.1. And I need a mover and a seconder to get it on the table, and this is what we're talking about. That the report from the planner regarding SP-2017-004, Bayfield Storage Corp., dated November 15, 2017, be received, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the necessary agreements once all technical aspects are addressed to the satisfaction of the township solicitor, township consulting engineer, and staff. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Hannah and McConkey. Any questions on this, since we have planning here? I think we've somewhat dealt. Yes, Councillor McConkey.
I'd just like to say it's a positive thing to see a business expanding in Springwater, so I'm all in favor of it.
Any other comments or question? All those in favor? Carried. Next, a amended council meeting, and the resolution will read, and I'll ask for a mover and second when I read it, that the report from the clerk regarding the 2017 amended meeting schedule dated November 15, 2017 be received, and that council hereby schedule a regular meeting with council on December 20th, 2017, and that final approval of the 2018 budget be included on the December 20th, 2017 agenda. Doesn't mean we're going to approve it, but at least it'll be on the agenda. That's all we're saying at this point, just for clarification. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Alan and Austin? Questions on that? Yes, Councillor McConkey.
My question is that this budget, or doing any budget, is one of the most important things that this council does. And we would never have a meeting on December 20th if it was to do with the Midhurst secondary plan, because we feel that it would be through the holidays and people could not come out. So I question why we would think it's okay to do a budget during this time when people are very busy with the holidays. So I just like to understand the difference between, because I believe this council would not do any EA meeting or any such thing for the Midhurst secondary plan on December 20th. So I'd like to understand how we feel that it's appropriate for this.
I guess I'll comment. I believe we should be, if at all possible, approving our budget before we start spending the money in the year that the budget covers. So I'm supportive of it, but I'm open to comments. Deputy Mayor Allen?
I also support it through you, Mayor French. I think we have 4 sessions in advance of that, and we'll be able to pick it apart substantially. So I think that we'll be pretty much approving it that night, or because changes that we have agreed on will be instituted by then.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. And I guess a side note, with Christmas being late this year, I know it's holiday season, but the kids aren't out of school yet. Business is still going, places aren't closed. Like the holiday close session, or sorry, not close session, but closures would be the 2 weeks to follow that.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor French. The 20th being 5 days before Christmas, I think maybe this is putting unnecessary workload on our staff, and I think that, well, I know that there's a lot of residents that like to come out and listen to the final budget, and especially, and see why we're supporting things that they don't agree with. And having it at that period of time before Christmas, I think, might be counterproductive to that. So I don't support that. I don't think it's necessary. We got lots of other days in January where we could be doing this. I don't think we have to do it 5 days before Christmas.
Councillor McConkey?
I also believe, yes, I believe there's a priority to get some projects done, but as we know from this year's budget, even just our last report had less than half of our projects completed. So the rush is based on priority of projects for 2018, and I believe that we could approve through the budget process. the mandatory projects that really need to be approved to get out the gate in January, which are very few, especially in the construction industry. So delaying it for a couple weeks in January, I do not feel would pose any issue, and I believe that our council is strong for transparency, and I believe that we should give this the same regard as we would for an EA meeting or anything else that we don't hold in the summer in certain months, and I think we have to put this criteria here. So you can proceed with the vote. I'm just not going to approve it.
Thank you. I mean, there was a comment made, we're putting pressure on staff. I don't think that is the case, but I'll let, Director Schmidt speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. Essentially, it comes down to council's will as to what they would like to do with the budget, but as the deputy mayor had indicated, there are 4 deliberation meetings scheduled at the end, 2 at the end of November and 2 in the beginning of December. And subject to those meetings, if council suggests that there's additional meetings required, then maybe a December 20th meeting is too aggressive. But simply what staff was looking at is that in the past, the approval of a budget for the past couple of years, essentially the night that we've approved it has been essentially a light meeting, if you will. Because essentially the budget has been essentially put in a format that council has already amended and is comfortable with passing. And so in previous years, that night of budget approval has been fairly light, I guess, if you want to call it that. As it relates to the comment about putting added pressure on staff, actually it's staff's preference to actually enjoy Christmas and not actually have to worry about a budget come January, to be honest with you. So we would all like to not have to work through the holidays, but if we have to, then we have to. It is what it is.
Councillor Austin?
I think we have the flexibility, if we have it on the agenda to do the final approval on the 20th, but we are feeling pressure because we haven't really completed the deliberations. We have the flexibility to move it into January, but if we target it for December 20th, that might be a good target, but as I say, it still leaves us some flexibility.
Okay. You've heard the resolution. Deputy Mayor Allen.
One question, if we don't do it on the 20th, does that mean we cancel the meeting?
No, because we want to make sure we're conducting the business of the township on an ongoing basis. And, the reason we scheduled that, because there's no meeting at the 1st of January, and would be 6 weeks. No, I'm sure there is always business that we can be dealing with. CAO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although we are trying to keep the meeting light, budget, there probably is a few matters of business that probably will have to be taken care of during that period of time.
Okay, thank you. So hearing the resolution, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So now we're moving into 9.3, and I'm sure we'll have some healthy discussion, but I'll read the resolution that I need a mover and a seconder for. That the report from the Director of Finance regarding the draft 2018 budget dated November 15, 2017 be received, and that the draft 2018 tax-based operating budget as presented November 15, 2017 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the draft 2018 water operating budget as presented November 15, 2017 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the draft 2018 wastewater operating budget as presented November 15, 2017 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, that the draft 2018 capital budget as presented November 15, 2017 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the 2018 policing charge increase to $226 per property for all properties except for farmland and managed forest properties, which will be charged $118 per property, and that the 2018 tax rate bylaw be presented, including the county and education requisitions, as soon as the tax ratios have been approved by the county of Simcoe, and I assume and the Board of Education. Is that what it's supposed to say? Oh, sorry, it continues. Oh, it doesn't, but, okay, does it say, should we put Board of Education or? That council adopt the compliance report for 2018 expenses that have been excluded from the 2018 budget presented November 15, 2017, and as outlined in the subject report as a requirement of Ontario Regulation 284-09 of the Municipal Act 2001. So we can have some discussion and just presentation. Can I get it on the floor? Can I have a mover and a second? Austin and Allen. And with that, Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council, township staff, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to present the township's draft 2018 budget. Before I get into the presentation, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you to the township's new manager of financial reporting and budgets, Mr. Christopher Chen. Mr. Chen has been with us since the end of September, I guess, and has been heavily involved with assisting in preparing the 2018 budget. So he will be assisting me as we walk through tonight's presentation as well as our deliberation meeting. So just wanted to have a quick introduction and make sure that members of council are aware of Chris. So with that said, the purpose of tonight's presentation is really to officially table the township's draft 2000 budget and to provide members of council and the public some highlights with respect to the plan. Furthermore, staff is requesting that the draft 2018 budget be received and referred to the special council meetings scheduled for November 27th, the 29th, December 4th, and December 6th, and to essentially allow council to deliberate and further consider what's being proposed for 2018. With that said, all members of council should now be in receipt of your budget binders. They were available late Friday. I apologize for that. And for the members of public, the budget is available on the township's website, so any questions that members of public may have, they're free to provide it through email and or contact Chris or myself here at the township, and we'll try to answer those questions as best we can. So the agenda for tonight is similar to what you may have seen in the past when we look at our budgets. So we'll be talking about the 2000 consolidated budget, and within that consolidated budget, we essentially have the draft 2018 tax-supported operating budget. We'll talk about some new initiatives that are being proposed for 2018, or what we refer to as program changes. We'll talk about the draft 2018 capital budget and 6-year plan. We'll also talk about the draft water and wastewater operating budgets for 2018. And sum up with some budget timelines, which I've kind of gone over, but also finally we'll talk about some items for council's consideration. So as it relates to the 2018 consolidated budget, the tax-supported operating budget has gross expenditures of $18.4 million, with gross revenues coming in at $18.1 million, so hence our gross expenditures are exceeding our gross revenues, leaving us with a net levy requirement of approximately $337,000. With that, the proposed tax levy increase for the township's portion is currently at 3.1%. If we flip over to the capital side of things, the 6-year capital plan is proposing an investment of $105 million, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Of that $105 million, the 2018 capital budget is proposing almost $15 million in investment. And furthermore, the proposed funding that's to come out of the operating budget to support the capital budget is just over $900,000. So when we take into consideration what the county has proposed and approved actually as of yesterday, and hence why the blended tax levy increase point there is highlighted in red, and you'll see a few other items throughout the presentation highlighted in red. We were advised yesterday that the county has approved their budget. as of yesterday, and hence we've tried to make the changes that we're aware of in this presentation. So there may be some reconciliation to be done, if you will, between the budget book and what we're presenting here tonight. But tonight does include the approval of the county's budget at 1.04%. So with that said, with the county's approval of 1.04%, with the township's proposed increase of 3.1%, assuming that the education stays revenue neutral, the blended tax levy increase, which essentially is what the taxpayer will see on their tax bill, would be 1.85%, or a $68 increase over last year. That assumes an average assessed home at $422,584. So anybody that has an assessment less than $422,000 essentially will look at a lower increase than that. Anybody over that amount would obviously look at an increase higher than this, what's on this page here. Turning to the water and wastewater side of the business, we have gross expenditures for our water rate operating budget at $1.93 million. Gross revenues at 2.76. So essentially, we're actually proposing to transfer money into the reserve fund, approximately just over $800,000. On the wastewater side, we have gross expenditures of $1.28 million. We have gross revenues of 1.8. Unlike the water side of things, on the wastewater, we are actually proposing to draw funds out of the wastewater reserve fund to support our budget for 2018. Just a note to members of council, staff have been in front of council last month with our water and wastewater rate study. Council essentially has approved new rates and the new rate structure for our water and wastewater. But as part of our budget cycle, we are trying to be accountable and transparent, indicating what we're proposing through the water and wastewater budgets. But essentially, those rates have already been approved through council. So diving a little bit deeper into the 2018 draft tax supported operating budget and comparing what our gross expenditures were versus our 2018 gross expenditures. So in 2017, we had essentially $17.2 million in gross expenditures. In the 2018 budget is proposing $18.4 million. Gross revenues, net of the levy requirement, so that's essentially the next line. So we have gross revenues of 16.8 in 2017, and in 2018 we have just over $18 million in revenues. So in comparison, for 2017 we had a deficit or a net levy requirement of just over $343,000, and in 2018 we're looking at $337,000. Now, one thing to clarify is the amount for 2017 does include the program changes. The $337,000 for 2018 does not include the program changes at this stage. So the next couple of slides, I just want to walk you through kind of what the breakdown of the net tax levy impact is and kind of show you what's really driving the budget for 2018. If we start at the top of this slide and we take into consideration what the net tax levy requirement would be without including any additional assessment growth and or additional revenue, we'd be essentially looking at a $190,000 levy requirement, or a 1.75% increase. If we add in what we're projecting to be our assessment growth or additional revenue, it's approximately $643,000, or 5.91%. When we take those two lines, the top two lines, and we add them together, the 2018 net tax levy, including assessment growth, is essentially a $452,000 surplus, if you will, or 4.16%. So if we stop there and we didn't do anything, essentially we wouldn't require a tax levy increase. However, that is not the case. So moving along, the next item is the compensation review. So members of council will recall in the summer of 2017, some information was forwarded to members of council regarding the compensation review. There's a $204,000 impact to the township, or a 1.88%. The next item is the cost of living adjustment and merit increases. Right now it's being proposed, the impact would be approximately $145,000, or 1.33%. We have additional pressures with regards to our group and statutory benefits. Right now, our group benefits, health and dental, speaking with our brokers, we are looking at about an 8 or 9% increase in our health and dental. We know that WSIB is also increasing, as well as EI is increasing, and hence Right now, it's about a $56,000 or $57,000 impact to the township, or 0.52%. The final line there is additional debt. This is principal and interest payments that we're going to be required to take on for existing road projects whereby they were proposed to be debentured in previous budgets. Now that the projects are essentially being finished, we're required to issue some debt. So that's about $174,000 impact, or 1.6%. The next line item deals with the Celebrate Springwater annual event. This was in front of council earlier this year and was deferred to budget deliberations. So right now there is a $39,500 impact in the 2018 budget with regards to this, so a 0.36%. The next item deals with a reduction in penalty revenue on overdue tax accounts. So just to explain this a little bit more is that the township has been much more aggressive in trying to ensure that we're collecting on our outstanding taxes receivable. So in doing so, obviously we're foregoing penalty revenue. However, having the money on hand helps our cash flow, and obviously without being aggressive, essentially we're required to pay our remittances to the county and to the education, regardless of whether or not we collect on property taxes or not. So this does help our cash flow from a budget perspective. Unfortunately, there is an impact. The next line is we do have some increases in contracted services, mainly related to our road maintenance area, of about $83,000 or 0.76%. The next two items are actually increases in our revenue, so we are projecting to have an increase in our investment income. We have been successful in actually bringing in a little bit more investment income through being a little bit more aggressive with our investments. But now with Mr. Chen on, I will, between the two of us, will be hopefully looking to in 2018 to perform even better on our investments. So there is a projection of about another $20,000 increase in revenue, so a reduction of the overall of 0.18%. And the last item is additional facility and ice rental revenue. We are projecting some increases in those rental revenues of approximately $43,000 or 0.39%. So again, taking in all of that information, essentially the township's in a position where there's a net levy requirement of $683,000 or 6.29%. Moving on to the next page here, we have what we're calling our service partners, if you will. So if you look at the library services as one of our service partners, right now there's a $91,000 impact or 0.84%. We look at the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, their general levy, they're looking at a $6,500 increase or 0.6%. In addition to that, they're also looking to up their asset management levy by essentially another $3,100 or 0.3% increase. And then the Severn Sound Environmental Authority, their general levy, they're looking at about a $5,000 increase or 0.4%. So again, our service partners, strictly just our service partners, is about a $106,000 increase or 0.97%. So when we factor in from the last slide here, first slide, the 452 plus the 683 plus the 106, we're looking at essentially a net levy requirement of $337,000 or 3.1% for the township. As it relates to the policing charge, so as you're maybe aware, is all properties in the township are currently charged a policing charge on their property tax bill. The current charge today is $216 per property, except for farmland properties. Essentially, the farmland properties or managed forest properties are charged $108. Staff has reviewed the policing costs for 2018, and we're proposing that the policing charge be increased by $10, so to $226 per property on the essentially all properties except the farmland properties, and then $118 for the farmland properties. So the impact on the average residential property, and as I mentioned earlier, the red notes changes that we've made since publishing the budget book. So walk you through this page. Essentially, the township's portion, as proposed tonight, essentially would be a $45 increase over last year, or 3.1%. The county's portion equates to roughly $12.94, or 1.04%, As I mentioned earlier, we're assuming the education remains revenue neutral at this stage. We are proposing a $10 increase in the policing charge. So overall, for a home assessed at $422,000, just over $422,000, they'd be looking at essentially a $67 or a $68 increase, or a 1.85 blended. Again, highlight, figures do not include any program changes or additional initiatives at this stage. So this would be assuming that no program changes are approved. So just to be clear. Just to provide a little bit more insight as to how the residential property tax bill is disseminated, if you will, is that the Township of Springwater retains approximately 40% of the revenue that we bring in. About 34% goes back or goes to the county. About 20% goes towards education, and approximately 6% goes to policing. So if for 2018, senior staff met and determined or prioritized 5 different program changes that you see here on this slide. Essentially, they are in priority order as senior staff is proposing to council for their consideration. Essentially, the first item is the the recreation facility monitors. That relates to the community hall transition. And so we are looking to bring on some, I believe, part-time staff or casual staff to assist with the transition. And so that we're looking at about a $36,000 net impact, or 0.33%. We are looking to add a permanent outdoor maintenance worker at a cost of about just under $59,000, or 0.54%. The fire department is looking at adding additional staff on long weekends, which comes at an investment of about $34,000, or 0.32%. We're looking to add a permanent bylaw enforcement officer at a cost of around $52,000. And then Public Works is also looking at hiring a co-op student for the summer months at a price of around $11,800. So those all combined, you're looking at a net tax impact of about $193,000, or 1.78. And again, that would be in addition to what was on the previous slide. Oops. Trigger happy. With regards to our service partners, again, service partners being the library and the conservation authorities, the library is looking at a program change for extended hours of service, essentially an investment of $46,000, or 0.43%. And then the Severn Sound Environmental Association, sorry, I knew I had that wrong, is proposing an invasive species coordinator, and I believe this is a pilot project that would come with a investment of $7,000, or 0.6%. So taking into account the staff proposed changes as well as our service partners, we're looking at a net tax impact of $247,000, or 2.27%. And again, that is in addition to what was discussed earlier. So that would be in addition to the 3.1% that we proposed earlier. So similar to the slide that we had on the impact on the average residential property, this one here includes the program changes, so this would assume that all program changes were approved. I'm not naive enough to think that that might be true, but I just wanted to provide council at least the information to say, if you wanted to consider that, this is what the outcome would be. So from the township's portion, again, it would be essentially a $78 increase for a home assessed at $422,584, or 5.37%. The County of Simcoe portion essentially would not change. It's $1,294, or 1.04%. Bringing in the policing charge increase of $10, you're essentially looking at just over a $100 increase, or 2.75% blended, again on a home assessed at $422,584. And again, this slide does include all program changes. So just a note, the average residential median assessment in the township is lower than $422,000, so the median being the midpoint. Hence, most, or I shouldn't say most, about 50% would be paying less than what's proposed on here, because the median is lower than the 422. Just point for council to consider. For the 2018 draft capital budget, we are looking at gross expenditures of $14.8 million. What's driving that is essentially we're proposing some major road and related infrastructure at about $3.4 million, our municipal buildings about $3.6 million, and our wastewater infrastructure of about $3.7 million. So between those three areas, it makes up about 70% of our gross expenditures for our 2018 capital budget. As you know, we have to provide a balanced budget, so we have sources of funding of $14.8 million. And the major sources of funding for 2018 are development charges of roughly $5.4 million, capital reserves of about $2.2 million, $1.9 million is proposed to be issued in debt, and then, as I mentioned earlier, the amount of money coming out of the operating budget to support the capital budget is just over $900,000. Some of the key projects that are included in the 2018 or proposed in the 2018 capital budget, and again, these are not all of the projects, these are just some of the more significant ones as in dollar-wise. So the first item is the multi-purpose complex of a price tag of $2.3 million. Please note that's not the full cost. That's simply just, it is a multi-year project, but that's the amount that's being proposed in 2018. The next item is the Elmville Lift Station, and again, that project has been ongoing, and we are in the design and construction stage, and hopefully we'll start to see some construction in 2018. The Albert Street East in Hillsdale, the first phase, is proposed at $1.4 million. The Anton Mills Water Tower, and this item here is, it's proposed at $1.1 million, but this is contingent on the township receiving the Ontario Community Infrastructure Funding Grant, so we won't be in a position to likely know whether or not we're successful until probably January of 2018. With that said, staff will likely, depending on whether or not we're successful, if we are, great. If we're not, then we will probably be coming back to council with another proposal, if you will, to do some work there, but at a reduced scope. The next project is the Elmville Wastewater Treatment Plant. The clarifier covers, so we're looking at design and construction and completing that project in 2018. The Fire Station 2 Yard 1 temporary building and or renovation, that in there at about $800,000. The St. Patrick subdivision second phase is also being proposed for 2018. And we're also proposing 2 additional ball diamonds here at the Tree Nursery Sports Park for an investment of $500,000. Furthermore, there's Craig Road that we've allocated funds towards in 2018 in the amount of $400,000. There's also funds in the 2018 budget for the Fire Station 2. Now this would be the new construction, so there's about $300,000 there. The water meter replacement program is the ongoing program that I believe started in 2016, and we're continuing this program into, I believe, 2020 or 2021. I believe the program, for the most part, has completed most of Midhurst, and now we're moving into some of the other areas in the township. Anton Mills and Minising, I think, are ones that are being targeted right now, if you will, and then they'll be moving out into Hillsdale, Phelpston, and eventually Elmville. The Midhurst Pavilion, why this is here is it's just simply a carryover. Obviously, the project won't be completed in 2017, but the intent is that the project would be completed in 2018, so we need to make sure we're carrying over money. The next item is replacing a tandem truck in the amount of $260,000. And then the next 2 items essentially are more improvements that are required at the Elmville Wastewater Treatment Plant. The first item being the aeration blowers. And then the other item is concrete repairs for the aeration and digester tanks. So, and finally, the last item here is the inflow and infiltration abatement program. And if you have any questions on that, I will gladly allow Ms. Coleman to speak to that item. But essentially, we're looking at a $250,000 investment for that project. So that kind of sums up the 2018 capital budget, and of course, part of the draft 6-year capital plan includes 2018 capital budget, but the 6-year plan overall is looking at gross expenditures of $105 million. Major areas here of investment are our municipal buildings, which we're looking at about just over $44 million investment. which essentially it relates to the multi-purpose complex as well as the new fire station. And then the other area of major investment is obviously in our roads and related infrastructure, and trying to make sure that that infrastructure is kept up to date. Similarly, we have sources of funding of $105 million. Major areas of sources of funding are development charges, roughly about almost $50 million that we're looking at. In addition to that, we have debt of about $27 million, and we also have money coming out of taxation of roughly about $6.9 million over 6 years. I do want to indicate that although the plan is showing a large portion to come from development charges, we are, as I mentioned earlier tonight, we are still in the process of negotiating with a development community to try to assist with alternative funding sources for some of these major pieces of infrastructure. With that said, if the township is not in a position to collect development charges and/or we don't have the DCs, then from a funding perspective, it'll still be funded through DCs, but from a financing perspective, we'll have to come back to council with some other options to consider, which the default would likely be debt if we're unsuccessful with some of our negotiations. So again, the water and wastewater, you've seen this slide earlier tonight. So again, simply to summarize the water side of the business, we're looking at transferring money into the reserve so that we actually have money to support infrastructure and operations in the future. On the wastewater side, we are looking at taking money, if you will, or drawing money out of the reserve fund to support operations in 2018. So this slide here provides the typical impact on a residential user as it relates to water and wastewater. And so as you may be aware or may recall that in October we talked about water and wastewater essentially for 2018, 2019, and 2020. Staff has proposed and council has approved that there would be no rate increase in water rates. So essentially, if you are just on water, you're not going to see a rate increase. If you consume more, obviously your bill will cost you more, but essentially the rates that you're being charged are not changing. On the wastewater side, there is an increase, essentially for a typical residential user that consumes 220 cubic meters per year. They would be looking at about a $30 increase over last year, or a 3.7% on the wastewater side. Overall, though, you're looking at a $30.20 increase, or a 2.2%. Essentially over the year, you're looking at essentially 2.52 or $2.52 per month. Sorry. So last couple of slides here, I just want to reiterate again kind of budget timeline. So obviously we're here tonight to discuss and table the 2018 budget. We do have a meeting scheduled on November 27th at 8:30 in the morning till 11:30 to begin our budget deliberations. That first meeting, essentially the meeting will be, the clerk will be providing an update on kind of a draft agenda for that meeting. Essentially that meeting though is we're looking at having our service partners present, so the library as well as the conservation authorities will be presenting that day. At this stage we're not looking at presenting anything else. I know council has other obligations that day, so we will essentially cut off no later than 11:30. Then we have another meeting scheduled on November 29th, again commencing at 8:30, and we need to finish off at 11:15, so we will start to discuss more township initiated items at that meeting, and then we'll continue our discussion on December 4th and December 6th. The December 4th meeting is scheduled from 6:30 in the evening till 9:30, and then the December 6th meeting is scheduled from 3 to 6 p.m. And then, as we mentioned earlier tonight, we are looking for adoption of the budget on December 20th. However, as Councillor Austin elegantly put it, there is flexibility in the system. And so if council's not in a position, obviously, to approve, then obviously we don't approve, you don't approve that night, and we move on. So I get, we put it there just, if we're there, then great. If we're not, then we push it into January. And just one other further note is obviously all of these, or maybe it's not obvious, but all of these meetings for those individuals that aren't able to attend here, we will be streaming all of these meetings online. And so if you're not able to make it to the administration center to participate in the meetings, you're more than welcome to sit in the comfort of your own home and listen to us online. So just to kind of sum up the last couple of slides here, again, these are just items for council's consideration, and the mayor has already discussed these items when he put the motion on the table. So again, essentially just wanting for council to consider the draft 2018 tax base operating budget, the draft 2018 water operating budget, and the 2018 wastewater operating budget, as well as the 2018 capital budget. All of those items essentially be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and also that the 2018 policing charge increase to $226, and that also would be deferred or referred, if you will, to those special budget meetings of council. We're not looking for council to approve that tonight. So that sums up my presentation for this evening, Mr. Mayor. We're here to answer any questions that you may have at this stage. In addition to that, if members of council or members of the public are wanting to ask questions and or meet with us, we're always welcome. You're always welcome to contact us, email, phone us, and drop in, and we're willing to have discussions with you to try to clarify and or provide some assistance in that manner. So, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor French. First of all, welcome, Christopher. Good to have you aboard. And I'm sure Director Schmidt appreciates your services already in a big way. Great overview. Thank you very much. I know we're all pouring through the binders and getting ready for these sessions. I just had two questions, and they could wait till we start the more detailed session. But on slide 6, you had assessment growth of 643,000, so close to 6%. How does that compare to the previous year? Just comment what your thoughts on assessment growth are, and the debt projection for the next 6-year rises to 27 million. That's from a current level around 6, is it, if I recall correctly?
Director Schmidt.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen. So on the first question, I believe last year's assessment growth was around 157,000 compared to the 642. So I know we've had some conversations in the past about when are we going to start seeing some of this revenue come in from new development. We're starting to see it. So is it 100%? No, we're still expecting more. But again, that is what MPAC has essentially provided to us at this stage, and that's our estimate at this stage. So your second question as it relates to debt, you're correct. Now, I believe in the budget book, we've stated that we're actually looking at probably issuing around $45 million in debt. And that kind of goes back to my comment about if we want to proceed with some of these projects and we're not successful in some of our negotiations with the development community to potentially provide alternative funding options, then we will likely have to issue additional debt as a default if council wants to move forward those projects. But to answer your question specifically, the current level of debt is around $6 million. Although
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mayor French. And one other point, thank you, Jeff. One other point, the 1% infrastructure that is built into the budget for next year. That, unlike last year, is not 1 plus the previous year. It's back to 1% instead of 2%. So we had 1% first year, 2% second year, and now we're back to 1%. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that would accumulate a total of about $500,000, a little over $500,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen, I believe it's approximately about $500,000, give or take. Yeah.
Councilor McConkey.
My question is I know that you used the 400 and some odd thousand and you said it's the average median price of a home. Any of the research, when I look at the prices of a home and you do the average cost of price of a home in Springwater, it's around 700,000. So my request would be, if council would allow, is that this budget, when tabled to the residents, that it show the median price, I guess the 460, which I don't know which home in my area I could buy for that. But basically, I would like to see what the impact is on a $700,000 home as well, so that's the majority of my residents. I believe you know that all of the residents have just moved into Stonewind Manor. their homes would be about that price. All my residents in Snow Valley, probably higher than that, but yeah, that's where I'm thinking.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councilor McConkey. So where we obtain the average residential assessment is through MPAC. And so that's where the information is coming from. And I understand that, yes, a lot of the new development in the southern portion of the township, that doesn't reflect what their current assessment is. Although also the price of $700,000 on those homes, if we actually had that in our assessment roll, that would be nice. But usually the assessment trails behind, and so we're not necessarily always getting that $700,000 on our assessment roll. But with that said, we can provide a breakdown of essentially for every $100,000 in assessment, it would cost essentially $14.47. So 7 times $15, if you will, for a $700,000 home under what we're proposing right now. Obviously, if there's amendments, then that would change. But we can show a graph or we can show a chart in those other deliberation meetings showing what essentially $100,000, every 100,000, what it would equate to. So, yeah.
I think we may have done that the first year. We put 2 or 3 levels. And I guess the other issue we have is we know houses are selling for 800,000, but if they were assessed some time ago, we might only be being assessed at 400 and some thousand for tax, and until there's a transaction, yeah, that doesn't change, because I know MPAC right now is probably really lagging behind actual values. What was their assessment year, MPAC?
The last
Reassessment.
assessment was 2016.
Yeah, so they missed the big bump up, and so we won't see it for a while, except for their escalation in those original assessments.
It's always a great conversation, and there is always, depending on what side of the fence you sit on, some would say that the assessment comes in fairly quickly, whereas others on the other side of the fence say that the assessment doesn't come in quickly. So, we do see delays, and in some respects, I have to give some kudos to my friends at MPAC that they've been working on trying to add more and more to the assessment roll, and you're seeing obviously that in our budget this year. Obviously, we'd like to see more, but again, resources and we're all somewhat crunched for resources, and they are looking at over I don't even know how many properties, millions of properties in Ontario, and so they have a large task to accomplish. So, but as you know, the assessment period is a 4-year period, and the assessment is phased in over 4 years, so there is usually a delay. But I wouldn't say that new assessment is 4 years behind. It might be about 18 months or so. But they're working on trying to improve that. They've made some changes at MPAC and looking at improving that. So,
Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor French. Director Schmidt, could you please look at that screen there? No, this one here. If we're going to be doing the budget presentation in this format, could we get this projector here redirected that way so that those of us on this side of the table can benefit from your comments, because it's really difficult to read what's there. And that light's been like this for some time, and I don't know if it's repairable or not, but if it can't be, if we could redirect that screen, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance because I don't mean to take a target at staff and finance department in particular, but on behalf of the residents of Springwater, whose finances I know council are responsible for, because the municipal act, the law says that council is responsible for the finances of the township, and that we cannot delegate that authority. So with that in mind, I will be asking a lot of questions as we go through the budget process. It's been pointed out a number of times that setting a budget target and then negotiating to reach that target, whether it be 3.1% or 1.85%, is a flawed process. That we should be looking at cost savings, and then we need to go from cost savings to looking at our increased expenditures, and that should determine what level of increase or deduction we have in taxes. Listening to you here tonight, I'm confident that you have done that, but I will be going through the budget line items to try to make it clear that we have done that. maybe I won't have to go through all the line items like I had to the first couple of years I was on council, because I have more confidence in you, if you like. Having said that, there may not be a willingness of everybody to go through the budget line items to the extent that I think we have to. If it's possible to give us before each meeting how much of the budget binder we will be going through, and so the staff that are like, if it's Public Works, for example, Public Works can be here, and planning doesn't have to sit through the discussion unless they choose to. It's not up to me to dictate who's here, but I'm just saying, if we're not going through their area, it may benefit them not to waste their day here. And it would also help me know what to prepare for each meeting, if you could give us some kind of an idea of what we'd be going through. Having said all that, thank you for your hard work, and I'll apologize in advance, but it doesn't mean it to be personal. I have to do my responsibilities, and that is to make sure we're going down the right road. Thank you.
Director Smith, yeah, maybe you'd like to speak to the sessions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hanna. So to answer, or to comment, I guess, is the agendas will be coming out in advance of those meetings, so not just members of council, but also to your point about the staff, as well as members of the public may be interested in certain sections as opposed to others. So we will be providing that, I believe, next week. The clerk and Chris and myself actually sat down today to draft something. Again, what I would caution, though, is that it is kind of a guideline. We have kind of put some time slots there, but we also are very cautious about, trying to say to council that you're limited to that amount of time to speak to that item. That's not what we're saying. We're just simply giving you a guideline to say, this is when we think we'll be discussing this item, and we'll try to stick to that guideline or that timeline, but depending on where council and what council's questions are, obviously, we'll move through the process as we can. I did want to make one comment to what you had mentioned there. So one thing that staff does do, and I do, is so when we're collecting and we're consolidating the budget, our job is essentially to coordinate the budget and to consolidate the budget, and then to essentially sit with senior management, which we did on a couple of occasions, and essentially indicate where we're at with the budget increase. If I had to come with what we had originally, I probably wouldn't be sitting here at the end of the night. So we have done some of that process already to the extent that we can. And again, the comment about setting a target, I strongly believe that setting a target, and maybe the mayor and or deputy mayor, and not to put you on the spot, but some of our other municipal or neighboring municipalities do that. And to me, I don't want to ever let members of council or the public assume that a 1 or a 2% or a 3% is what we really need. The process for us, the way that I've been developing it, is we present to council what we feel as senior management this township needs, and what our residents are telling us. That's what you're seeing here tonight. Again, council obviously has their thoughts, and to the extent that amendments come forward, then we're in council's hands. But essentially, staff has gone through that process to try to massage, if you will, the budget to a point where we think it's to a point that it's reasonable. But again, council, we're in your hands.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Actually, maybe for clarification, because there's always a misunderstanding in budgets. Sometimes people feel, well, they just took last year's, added a few dollars, took off a few dollars, where, many organizations talk about base budgeting, and sometimes they call it zero-based budgeting, which everybody misunderstands, so we'll just call it base budgeting. And it is my understanding that's what you are doing at each of the departments. You're saying, okay, now what do we need? Forget about what you spent last year. If you don't spend it this year in that area, it doesn't mean if you need it the following year, it may not come back in. And maybe you just want to kind of drill down a little bit how we do the budget, because there's still an assumption out there. The general public, we just look at last year's and add or subtract from it in percentages or dollars. And having witnessed for the last 3 years, I don't think that's the case, but I'd like you to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And you're correct, is that, each year we do take a look at what was approved the previous year. And in some cases, there are some areas where we do one-off projects, and hence, that's built into the base. But we actually look at that when we establish the next year's budget and say, well, hang on a second, that project was a one-year project. You don't need to have those additional dollars again. So okay, you're not having those dollars, we need to realign and maybe reallocate to other departments. So we do strongly take a look at, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here can probably comment as well, but we do try to stay close to the base as much as we can. Obviously, this year, you know, we are $190,000 over what our base was last year, if just strictly speaking about base. We have some pressures that we're trying to deal with. That's the reality of the situation. And, you know, as I mentioned, we've gone through quite a few meetings with our senior management and my colleagues to try to keep it as low as we can. You know, we'll go through those budget deliberation meetings with council, and we'll provide justifications for those areas where increases are happening. Whether council agrees or not, ultimately it's council's decision as to what you want to do. Will there be impacts? Possibly. You know, if money's not available to do certain things, well, there could be potential impacts. But, you know, that's for staff to be able to address as we walk through those sessions. And if council's not agreeable, then we make the amendments and we move forward. So that's kind of the process is, you know, again, simply saying to you that we need a 2% increase, we may not need a 2% increase, or we are saying a 3% increase or a 4% target. To me, it doesn't make sense. To your comment, it's simply, okay, in certain areas, then we're just going to inflate certain areas by 4% because that's what the target is. Well, to me, that's not right. We present a budget to this council based on what our priorities, what our senior management feels the priorities are. Sometimes it's 1%, sometimes it's 3%, sometimes, although not in the last couple of years, it could be 5 or 6%. But that's kind of how I approach the budget process. We know what the target is. We've been in the game long enough, if you will, to know that 1-2% is usually where you want to go, but we're trying to tell you that we're having some pressures trying to getting there this year. We're open to obviously have discussions in those deliberation meetings and see what we can come up with.
No, and I thank you for that explanation, because yes, we do, everybody knows that 1 or 2% increase would be nice, but we also saw what happened, the big friends to the south of us, of doing that for 20 years and not really paying attention to it, and ending up with a $3 billion infrastructure problem, and all you have to do is drive around for a while, and you'll find out where they are. And so far, we've been kind of avoiding that. Other questions, comments? Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French, through you to Director Schmidt. In the resolution that is before us to approve the budget as tabled, most items were to be referred to the special budget meetings, except for the policing charges, which indicates that the way I see it right now, it looks as if we're supposed to approve that tonight because there's nothing about referring it. But you did indicate earlier that it will be open for discussion during the budget deliberations. So I'm wondering if maybe that we should add that phrase be referred to, or clause, be referred to the special budget meetings.
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Austin, that's correct. Essentially, we're not asking for council to approve anything tonight, except for the compliance report, the last item there. Other than that, we're not asking for any approval. Essentially, we want to move to the November 27th meetings and subsequent meetings and deliberate and look for hopefully final approval at the end of December and or in January.
I think the point was, if you look at that line, every other line says referred to special budget meetings. That one doesn't. It would suggest by the wording of it, we are approving that, but we're not.
No.
So it is being referred.
Correct.
Okay, because I did want to have a little discussion on that. It was a very minor one. So should we alter that slightly and say that it is also being referred to the special budget meetings? Yes.
Sure.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Director Schmidt. At what point during the budget, or is it going to be a council meeting, that the report or the discussion about our reserves comes to council?
Director Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coghlan. So on the November 29th meeting, we're looking at providing a continuity schedule of our reserves as we, where they stood at the end of 2016 versus what we estimate them to be at the end of 2017. Obviously, we don't know for sure. We haven't finished the year. So that information will be provided, and we'll also be speaking to the status of our reserves and reserve funds during that meeting on November 29th.
Thank you. And at what point would council then have an opportunity to collapse reserves or, sorry, to join reserves? Speaking to Deputy Allen's point earlier this evening about how this council initiated a infrastructure renewal reserve, of which there may be 450 plus in it. There's also a road maintenance reserve with money in it. So I think that that's important for council to have a good idea before we go to continue. I mean, it's a great path that we're on, but to have an idea of exactly how much we do have in reserves.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coghlan. So the idea is that we would provide council through the budget process the status of the reserves, and so that you can see kind of where we estimate we're going to be at the end of this year, and also to have a little bit of discussion about the reserves and reserve funds and what we're projecting, some ebbs and flows over the next number of years based on our capital plan. But to answer your question specifically, I think the collapsing and or the reallocating of reserves, if you will, or reserve funds. My thoughts is that would come forward in 2018 through our Finance and Audit Committee and through our policy development, because we have quite a few policies that we have to develop and bring forward to this council, which were part of our long-range financial plan, and whether it be debt management or whether it be investments or whether it be reserves and reserve funds. So we know that reserves and reserve funds are a hot topic, if you will, and so that will likely be one of the first items that we bring forward to Finance and Audit Committee in 2018, and hopefully that will provide more information to yourself. So,
Other questions? I guess, one comment I had, and I liked the direction we were going on in infrastructure, I know it takes a lot of calculations to really know what the right number is. And of course, I talked to Director Schmidt and I said, my happiness would be if we climbed it at 1% a year and up to where it becomes 5% of our base budget. But that's obviously not going to happen, because I looked at it very simply. Assets 20 to 40 years, so if we raise that over 20 years, then we're going to be in good shape if there's a major bridge or road construction or whatever, reconstruction. But I guess that's the only disappointment. It's going slightly backwards on that, back to 1%. Director Schmidt?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, one of the things that I forgot to mention to you in our discussion is that actually through our grant that we got through FCM to actually start establishing an asset management policy and to also provide a little bit more capacity in the township for asset management, that is something that likely will be coming forward to this council, an asset management policy in 2018. We're under the understanding that an asset management regulation will be passed any day now, and the timeline will be January 1st, 2019 to have a policy in place. So that may assist as well to your point about, taking a look at all of our reserves and how do we look, and also talking about, I think we've had conversations about, well, should we actually be putting aside 100% so that we have 100% dollars for when we need to replace that asset, or should we be putting aside 50% or 60% or whatever the number is. So I believe that'll be part of our discussion in 2018. That project we're looking to kick off fairly quickly. The funds have to be spent by September of next year. So we'll be coming to council in the new year with some information on a policy and also a training opportunity. We're looking at likely scheduling a training opportunity in 2018 for not just staff but also council to talk about asset management and to give a little bit more information about what asset management truly is and where the township is likely to go with it.
So now with Mr. Chen on board, I guess we are going to try and ramp up and come up with some of the policies that we've talked about generally, like percentage of revenues and what our policies are going to be and those type of things, so they're a little more solidly
Correct.
written out in policies, because I think it is important. And it would be nice if someone comes back and says, well, if you can gather 2 or 3% a year for this infrastructure kind of reserve, it'd be nice to know that. And I agree that, the policy, and there is the argument, should current taxpayers pay for it or should future ones? And maybe it does have to be, a happy medium where maybe it is 50% of it. But it would be nice if we did have a policy so we knew where we're going. So, and we're fortunate. I mean, all you have to do is look at our reserves, our roads, and all that throughout the township. We don't have any major disasters in the foreseeable future. So that's a credit to past councils and kind of the management of doing that. But nowadays, because everything costs so much money, we do have to stay on top of it because we might have a rainy day come up. But anyway, I want to congratulate you on the detail and the budget. I have some thoughts, and I'll deal with them as we go through it bit by bit. But if we took, before the enhancements, and I think you're going to come up with a charter at our first kind of meeting in that, but it is probably good for us as the council to understand, what did we really do in the last 3 years, our portion, the overall, and what was the impact of the tax on the taxpayer, because ultimately, it may be broken into 3 segments when he gets it, but he wants to know how much it increased. And I know we had a pretty lively discussion on it last year. So I think if we just knew that, that would help us make some of the decisions and also kind of direct it in certain areas. But, I do appreciate the detail, and, those that want to kind of get down to the line items, if things aren't moving, I think that's great too. And obviously, your team is available to kind of respond to them. And I would encourage you, because, I said earlier, in my head, in business, I never approved a budget in the year that I was spending the money. And there were public companies, and, well, they wouldn't allow it, simple as that. So I'd like to see us move ahead, like the county. It's got its budget approved for 2018, knows what's going to be spent, where it's going to be spent. And we don't approve it just because of a few projects where we can go for early bidding. Really, you have to plan all your cash management and all those kind of things that are going to happen. And so, I would love to see if we could hit the December 20th, but as everybody said, that's not in stone if it has to move. And the way we did it last year, I think worked very well by breaking it into chunks, because we had good, healthy discussion, and also saves time for our senior staff. They can focus on those sessions. They don't have to sit here like bumps on logs. And so any other information you can give to us as we start, and I encourage, all of us in council, if you have your questions, let's start getting some of them in now. So, maybe there's some simple adjustments that staff want to make after your input. I don't know. I don't know what they may be. But I think there is some pressure, on the amount we're looking for, especially in the enhancements, how we're going to deal with them. And so we all have to do our homework. And but anyway, I appreciate the effort that's went into it. Any further comments or questions? Okay, so the only change in this resolution, just so you know, because I'll read the last 2 lines because there was I guess it didn't change, right? It didn't change that. No, okay, sorry. So I'll read the second last paragraph, that the 2018 policing charge increased to $226 per property for all properties except for farmland and managed forest properties, which will be charged $118 per property, and be referred to the special budget meeting of council for deliberation and consideration. So they all follow the same routine now. So that's the only change in the resolution. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And just a very small comment on the budget, and you may want to reconsider it. The farmland and forest properties have always been half. And right now, you added $10 to each. I'll bring it up when we're going to refer to it, but I think it should be half. So we'll move on the agenda here, and 9.4, and we have our Director of Fire and Emergency Services here. And I need a mover and a seconder, and I'll read what we're talking about. The report from the Director of Fire and Emergency Services regarding entering into automatic aid and technical rescue agreements dated November 15, 2017, be received, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the necessary agreements. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Hannah and Coughlin. And maybe we'll just start with questions since we have the chief here, or would you like to do an overview, or would you just like to respond to questions?
A quick overview might be
Okay.
pertinent, Your
Carry
Honour.
on.
I'll say Your Honour, Your Worship, I should say. Wrong audience. Thank you so much. So I was in front of council a couple of months ago to recommend the adoption of the automatic aid and technical rescue agreements that we have with the City of Barrie. We had some good discussion, I guess, about, the wording. And about whether or not they'd be interested in using the fee that they charge us as a retainer. CAO Brinney and I met with the acting fire chief in Barrie since Chief Boys had departed for another job. He was very open to discussion and was going to take the items that we were asked to present higher up the food chain in Barrie, presumably to their city manager. Had to wait a few weeks to get a reply back. And it wasn't exactly what we were hoping for. Basically, their response, to paraphrase it, was we think the agreements represent a good deal and are in the best interest in the township of Springwater to go ahead and sign them. Something that CAO and I also agree they are fantastic value for money and far cheaper than us training and equipping our firefighters to do the same tasks. So it would be my recommendation, based on the fact that the City of Barrie is not willing to change its agreements for us, that the mayor and clerk be authorised to sign them anyway.
And we did send you away to ask questions. You've done that. So questions or comments from council? Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, on the aerial apparatus agreement, by 2022, we're up to $10,000 a year. I know that's not a lot of money for $1 million plus equipment with 4 firefighters that come to service us. My question is, how often have we ever had to use the aerial apparatus?
Director Givet.
Good question, and I'd love to be able to give you an answer. I don't want to fudge it because I've only been here for a year. I do know that we've used Wasagas in Elmvale for a church fire. That's obviously not the same piece of aerial apparatus. However, I would anticipate with the building that's going into Yorkwood and Stonewood Manor, that you'll and the Midhurst secondary plan as it builds out, that you would probably expect to see it getting used. I can tell you it does come as part of our automatic aid agreement to certain incidents. So for instance, the recent fire at the Barrie Golf and Country Club, they actually had a tower there. We didn't have to use it, fortunately, but it was available for us to use at that fire.
Thank you. That's the only one I was aware of, was the Barrie Golf and Country Club, that it has been used, but it might be others. And I was just wondering if it justified that $10,000 expenditure by 2022 if we've only used it once. But I'm leaving that to you. I still think it's a good deal, but that was my only observation, so thank you.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor French. I also remind that if the ERRC goes through with those buildings there, that potentially an aerial apparatus would be required for any fires that might occur there.
Any other questions or comments from anybody? Well, thank you for the update. So all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So zoning administrators, can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Coughlin? Hannah? And it's going to read that the report from the Director of Planning Services regarding an update to the appointment of the zoning bylaw administrator and deputy zoning bylaw administrators dated November 15, 2017 be received, that the appropriate bylaw be presented. Questions of planning, or I guess the CAO will answer them. Oh no, there's Director Spagnuolo hiding back in the corner. So we'll let him come forward if there are any questions. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Director Spagna. What does a zoning bylaw administrator do?
Director Spagnell.
Thank you, Mayor French, through you to Councillor Austin. A zoning administrator ensures that building permits are in compliance with the township zoning bylaw, so it's a required appointment in order for staff to sign off on building permits as per the legal requirements under the zoning bylaw.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, now we're going to have information reports. So can I have a mover and a second to get it on the table, and then we'll start pulling them. Coghlan? Hannah? Okay, and we're talking about 10.2 to 10.5. Is there any of these you would like to pull for discussion? Councillor Coghlan?
10-4?
Any others? Okay, so 10.4, so is it a comment or, pardon? Okay, we will pull it. So moved by Coghlan, second by Hannah, that the reports items 10.2 through to 10.5 be received as information, with the exception of item 10.4 to be introduced separately. All those in favor? Carried. The floor is yours, Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Director Belcourt. Thank you for the report. It is very in-depth, and I think it gives council a great idea of what the two different systems are and how this can impact our community. I will be bringing forward tonight that we have this become part of our budget deliberations. I do believe that it should be part of our 2018 discussion. I think that it needs to be there. It's in our recreation master plan as part of that. Throughout the community and all the communities that within Springwater, it doesn't matter if I'm at a school or an arena or a soccer field, something like this is just an absolute added asset to our municipality. They're strongly used in other communities. Speaking with Director Schmidt, the $30,000 operation costs that come with it, if you break it down, it's about $5 a house if you bring it down to per capita. And I don't think anybody in Springwater can drive their family to a local or not so local splash pad to have that same experience for the same money. I do think that it also will bring economic benefits to the town of Elmville. I think that people may drive further north past the zoo when they come to visit. So I can open it up to the floor for any other, but I am looking for someone to second to have this become part of budget deliberations, and I'm not sure how Clerk Renee would like that to progress.
Madam Clerk. CEO Brinley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we're looking in the budget, part of the budget also contains the 6-year capital plan. This is in the 6-year capital plan, my understanding is, through our treasurer. So through that discussion, council can talk about where that lands, whether we want to move it up, move it back. It could still be discussed as part of the normal budget process.
I'm sorry, and through you, Mayor French, or to CAO Brinley or Director Schmidt, I was to understand the operational costs are not part of the budget, so therefore if it got moved up, my concern is that the $30,000 be incorporated so that council has an idea of what the operational cost would be in 2018.
Director Belcourt, do you have some thoughts on this? Or Director Schmidt?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Councillor Coghlan. Sorry, I was just speaking with Director Belcourt about timing. So, would we actually, if council was to approve a splash pad in the 6-year, or in 2018, I guess specifically, would we actually have enough time to construct and be operational in 2018? I'm not sure. We don't know. That's kind of what we don't know, I guess, depending on where council goes with this. So, and even then, would we incur the full 30,000 in operational costs? It might not be operational for obviously the full summer of 2018. So, again, I think the idea would be is that it is in the 6-year capital plan, as CAO Brindley has mentioned. It's up to council to determine whether or not it's brought forward or not. And I think that's probably the most appropriate time is pass a motion at that time and determine whether or not it is to be brought forward, and then staff, I guess, could come back with more detailed information as to timing and such, and whether or not there would be an impact on the 2018 budget,
Not a problem.
as in operating budget, sorry.
Yeah. Councillor McConkey.
Just as a heads up, and before we get into the budget discussions on this, as I recall, the Recreation Master Plan did say that the splash pad would be in the south end prior to something in the north end. We all know that the TD Bank is pulling out of Elmvale. We all know that the development has not been as strong in Elmvale as it has been in the south end. When we look at a business case, and we look at economic drivers, and we look at what residents want and need, why would it have been pulled from the south and go to the north first? I did not remember a motion for that.
Director Schmidt or Director Belcourt, maybe you want to comment generally on the two locations of it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the first stab, I guess, at it, and if I get it wrong, I guess I'll forward it on to Mr. Belcourt or Director Belcourt. So just to clarify, there are 2 splash pads in the current proposed 6-year capital plan. The one in the south is proposed to go, I believe, in 2021, and the one in the north is to go in 2023, I believe it is. So,
Sorry.
again, staff haven't necessarily determined through the 6-year capital plan as to the specific location. We've simply have said the north and the south, subject to obviously council's approval and or thoughts. So,
Follow up?
I believe this report truly talks about going into the Elmvale area. Can you correct me if I'm wrong on that? And I believe that's what Councillor Coghlan is assuming when she's moving this motion forward.
Yeah, no, and I think to help out, yes, this report was in response to a request that was made by Councillor Coghlan, which is appropriate. This addresses it. And again, when it comes to the budget time, if she's successful and convinces the rest of council that, there should be a splash pad there and it's moved forward, we as council will make that decision. Councillor McConkey?
We as council have not been given all of the information to make a decision with. We have not been given any information on the south end and why it would be, this would come forward first. There's no way. And I will tell you, I will be very strong. All the residents, I don't usually do this, but anyone listening, you will hear me loud and clear that if a splash pad is to go in, it will go in the south end where we are receiving all of the development charges, the 75% at least, from.
Okay, hear you loud and clear. So back to the idea of Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the council. In the report, it does not reference either the north or the south. What I've put in the report is recommendation 28 in the Recreation Master Plan, which states by 2030 provide the first of 3 water plays facilities as follows. North Service Area, proposed Elmvale Community Park, 2016 to 2020. The South Service Area is part of the multi-facility community center and library proposed for Midhurst, if and when the suitable site is chosen. So there was no indication that the south was going prior to the north. It's simply following the recommendation in the master plan, but again, that is up to council to decide when and where these facilities would go.
And since we're having a lively discussion, I think it was suggested it might be best to kind of table a motion in the budget meetings, because I fear with the conversation here, if we pull it out and deal with it separately, I guess we could even modify the motion receiving it, it could very well fail, and then it wouldn't even become part of the budget discussion. So it may be the best appropriate place to deal with it. Is that fine?
No, that's
Councillor
absolutely.
Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. And through you to Director Belcourt and the rest of council, the assumptions that I have are based on the Recreation Master Plan and previous meetings from council. A splash pad for the North Service area has been talked about and has been part of our budget deliberations. It was slated first for 2016, first brought up by community residents in 2012. That is why I'm continuing to push for it, and as much as I appreciate that, I think these water play facilities are amazing, and I would love to have one in the south as well, but this is, you're right, this report is driven by a stemming to try and get one into Elmville. So yes, the assumption is correct.
Councillor Hannah?
I just want to point out, we've never approved the Recreation Master Plan. I've always said there's a lot of flaws in it. This is a typical example, and I'll let it go at that.
Councillor Coghlan?
Yes, and thank you. And I will point out too that the Recreation Master Plan does need to be approved by council because this council does pick and choose which recommendations do suit it. We have gone forward and used this exact report from the same consultant, obviously, to support other initiatives in other communities. So to say that some portions of it are flawed and some are not, that is to the individual's discretion, but I do also agree that we need to approve a report so that there can be a clear vision for recreation in Springwater.
Thank you. Councillor Austin?
I'd like to thank Councillor Coghlan for her strong support for the splash pad in Ward 1. And reiterate the point that she made about the fact in the report that was presented to us tonight by Director Belcourt, it did refer to the recommendation 28 that the first one be in Elmville. Also, Councillor Coghlan referred to the request by citizens in Elmville from as far back as 2012 to have a splash pad built, and those citizens at that time were willing to raise funds for the building of the splash pad. So there has been strong citizen involvement in this one as well. I'd like to also add that Councillor Coghlan listed the benefits of a splash pad. I'd like to add to that list the fitness the fitness aspect of it for children, providing an activity which helps them improve their fitness level.
I don't want to debate the approval of a splash pad tonight, but I'll take some further comment on it. Councillor McConkey?
One comment is if there is such interest, I'd like to know how much funding has been raised to date to move this project forward. I know on any other projects, when they do have a desire, they do start fundraising in advance. So I would just like to know before the budget meeting if there has been any funding received.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to receive it. Is that good with everybody? Okay, moved by Colin. Can I have a seconder on receiving it? Just receiving the report? Austin? That the report item, Councillor Ritchie.
Mayor French, I read this report, and not that I support splash pads, but I just wanted to bring to the Director of Rec that wrote the report that it's all fine and dandy to have them, but how do you control the temperature of the cement when it's so hot that other people in other municipalities have had kids scald their feet? And this was on the news back in the summertime, where it was down in Newmarket. So if that, you got to put sensors in the concrete. Anyways, I'm bringing this to light, and maybe you can add the information at another time, because that's something serious for everybody to be thinking about if and when we go to talk about this at a future date. But I just want to share it with the director. Maybe he already knows about it, so.
Yeah. No, I think when we get to some new project, we need a lot of kind of commentary from municipalities that have operated and what their situations are, and instead of just blindly going into it. But, so we're going to receive the report tonight. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you. And one last, when we are creating the agendas for our budget deliberations, is it possible to have recreation considered during our December 4th meeting? Because it is from 6:30 to 9 p.m. and it may give residents the opportunity to be here for that portion of it.
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coggan. I don't have the agenda right in front of me, but based on what I remember, I believe it is already scheduled for that night potentially, but with that said, we can make those arrangements.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard the resolution. All those in favor? Carried. We're moving on to verbal reports, official plan update. Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor French. Staff is continuing to work with the consultants to finalize the first draft for release of the discussion paper and the growth management strategy. We're hoping to have a draft for internal review by the end of November. We're aiming to have, hopefully, it open for public review or viewing in the new year.
And while you're there, economic development updates.
Thank you, Mayor French. Just like to remind everybody about the business breakfast scheduled to take place tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning. That's when registration starts at the Vesper Valley Golf Course. The morning will include breakfast, presentation on the community improvement plan for the municipality, along with economic development initiatives, and along with a brief presentation from the County of Simcoe. I'd also like to provide council with an update that E-Solutions is working heavily on the marketing strategy for the Township of Springmore as per the economic development, as per the initiatives within the economic development strategy for the township.
Thank you. County updates. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Allen first.
Thank you, Mayor French. County Simcoe has been very busy. We've had a couple of full agendas over the last month. So I'll touch on about 5 things here. The first is standard size garbage containers. As we had talked about before, in an effort to increase diversion and reduce garbage excesses, the 80-liter container is under discussion about trying to get people to adhere to the 80 liters of disposal of garbage and no more than that. There had been a motion to have a pilot program to try a variety of different types of containers, and as well branded 80-liter garbage bags, and the cost of these would be partially subsidized by Simcoe taxpayers. This was debated but defeated in favor of option 1, which was to maintain status quo for garbage containers. So because of the different rural and municipalities, the pilot program was not voted for. The next was a waste export contract extension, and the contract expires on March 2018, and the contract involves redirecting garbage to Walker Environmental Group and the Niagara area. There are 2 options for extension of the contract for a minimum of 5 years. One was to process at the Emerald Energy from Waste Inc. Burning of garbage in Brampton, or the disposal at the Walker Environmental Group's Niagara area landfill site. The staff recommended that garbage be sent to the landfill option beginning April 1, 2018, given a possible cost saving of approximately $275,000 annually over the Emerald Energy from Waste. That was voted to proceed with that contract extension, and the savings would go towards public education regarding increasing diversion. The Bertram Industrial Plan Subdivision Official Plan Amendment to approve the 8-lot extension in Springwater that we discussed at council here was approved. There was discussion and approval of the Simcoe Paramedic Strategic Deployment Plan. The Joint Compliance Audit Committee that we're familiar with, it was approved to establish with the participating lower tier municipalities a Joint Compliance Audit Committee. So that's going to provide commonality and saving of some monies going forward. And the County of Simcoe Integrity Commissioner, a firm was appointed to be the County of Simcoe's Integrity Commissioner to oversee a municipal code of conduct, a municipal conflict of interest act for a period of 5 years starting January 2018. And last but not least is the 2018 county budget. There was lots of back and forth. Certain councillors tried to have items added and some deleted, and it did come up to the end to be a 1.04% increase versus the 2% increase each year for the last 2 years. So that was a positive result. Thank you.
And yeah, I don't think I have any other comments about the county. One of the things that, during the debate when they switched, and I supported the kind of incineration solution, because in the long term, if this county doesn't want to dig holes, why should we be digging holes in other jurisdictions? And plus, unfortunately, the Ministry of Environment doesn't see any difference between the incineration and the landfill. So there's no extra points if you are using an incineration. It is a very effective plant that Emerald Waste has, and I was disappointed because they'd used them up until this extension, and I think it was short-sighted on the environmental impact over the longer haul. But there was a original plan, as Deputy Mayor Allen said, to take all the $275,000 and shift it into education. Somehow, when it got to being its value is 210. I'm not sure how, but that's how the final little slash in the budget got it down to the 1.04, because instead of just parking it for education, council decided they wanted that eliminated from the budget, and so that's how we got down to the 1.04. So lots of good, lively discussion at the county on the budget items, and it worked out fairly well, I think, for all the taxpayers in Simcoe County. Municipal updates. I'll start with Councillor Austin.
Yes, as everyone is aware now, the TD Bank in Elmville has decided to relocate to Barrie in May. Just to let everyone know that the mayor has been in touch with the TD Bank officials and is trying to get the information meeting for the general public to be moved up to as close as possible, perhaps even as early as later this month. So the mayor has been working on this problem, much of it behind the scenes, and that's the only information that I can share right now, but we will keep people up to date as anything develops. Thank you.
Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, for council's benefit, the Midhurst Hall Board met on Monday. They elected a bunch of new people to look after the hall. Some are the same as before. And the mayor and the deputy mayor were kind enough to show up to show support. The only position that wasn't filled was somebody to look after Autumn Fest. So if anybody out there wants to look after Autumn Fest, speak up, or it's probably not going to happen. Thank you.
Other updates? Any comments? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor French. Last Thursday night, I was able to, despite the storm, I got up to Victoria Harbour Community Hall. The Severance Sound Environmental Association had their awards night. Why I'm bringing this up is the mayor of Tate Township, Scott Warnock, got up and he spoke about going to Montreal. The Great Lakes Water Commission was held in Montreal this year, and he spoke about going there and the recognition that the Severance Sound is being given, even on the American side, for the water quality that they do up in the Georgian Bay area. So he was very impressed, and I just want to share that with everyone. They do a great job, so thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor French. I'd like to share an update with council on the starting of the planning of the 2018 Springwater Golf Tournament. Councillor Hanna has made inquiries whether it could be held at Vespra Private Golf Club and communicated back to Mayor French and myself. And I just want to know if council does want to have input or leave the review and selection and organization of the tournament to the golf committee, as has been the case in the last 3 years? And if so, should we formally constitute that committee?
Any feedback? Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, and I would just further to that, I was asked by the mayor to approach Westbrook Hills Golf Course. 2017 was the first year they allowed outside golf tournaments. We were on their schedule. We end up not going there, and they're not sure they're going to allow any outdoor or outside golf tournaments to be there in the future. However, they did say they would consider allowing Springwater Township to be there in 2018. The manager will take it before the board of directors in December and let me know whether we're going to be allowed to go there or not. It will be a little more expensive than what you've paid in the past last year, but there again, you get what you pay for.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. The golf committee as it stands, were the terms of reference for 1 year or a term of council?
I don't even know, I don't even think there is a terms of reference, or isn't. It's been an ad hoc committee that just got together. And quite honestly, you know, that's the way it's been done. They've been together, and I guess the reason being it's not taking any taxpayers' money. It's kind of self-sufficient. So, you know, I'm not sure it needs to be the will of council, but if for some reason council want to pipe in on it, that's up to them. Councilor McConkey?
Well, I'd like to maybe understand where you're selecting and have a discussion before it goes to the golf tournament, if there is some options. Usually there's not an option. Usually it's chosen, and this is the one that went forward. But if we get an option this year, then maybe we should discuss it so that we better understand it.
So, I guess I would suggest when we get to it, someone want to do a notice of motion asking council's, because it sounds like we want council's approval. If you want to discuss options, it obviously, we want council approval. I'm not sure it's necessary, but I'm here at the will of council. So when we come to the notice of motion, if someone's so inclined, they want to put forward a motion, then we can deal with it at that time. And would that be appropriate?
You'll put the motion? Okay.
All right. So, yeah, the only municipal update I have is I'll just like to add to the kind of TD, and I think Councillor Austin's being kind when they said TD is moving. No, they're not. They're closing a branch. The only thing they're being moving is the accounts, and to existing branches in Barrie, Midland, and Wasaga Beach. And I have had discussions with the district vice president at TD, you know, and kind of outlined, we did that in our press release, the hardships that it presents to the community. They are going to leave their cash machines there, and we're going to have some discussions on the building, because they own it, over the next little while. But even though their obligatory meeting they had scheduled for January, because there's lots of rumors going around, I did suggest to them, and they thought it was a good idea, and I think I'll know by this Friday if they are going to schedule a meeting, basically the last week of this month, just a town hall, you know, do you have questions, how your account's going to work? The district VP was speaking with them, the branch manager, and so I'm waiting to hear whether they do that or not. And that's about all I can tell you. You know, we will certainly see if there are other financial institutions that may like to service the area, because Elmville has been slow to grow, but it is growing. And there are a few more, you know, storefronts that are active on the main street, and it's not just the TD. TD is a very responsible bank, but I do think that they have a social responsibility to the local communities that have made them what they are, and whether they follow through on that, I guess we'll find out. But as we know, we have no control of banking institutions. I did meet this afternoon with MP Nuttall, expressing my concern because they are federally regulated, and as he said to me, he says, if they made the decision to close, they're probably going to be closing it. But he'll reach out to the appropriate people at the federal government. So that's all I can tell you at the present time. So any other further municipal updates or comments? Oh, yes, and actually, I'll let you speak to it. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. I just wanted to mention our volunteer appreciation dinner that's coming up next Thursday. I'm very excited to attend that, and it's going to be, as per directed through Councillor Hanna and McConkey, a motion to increase the funding for that. So it's going to be a little bit different this year, a little bit more dinner included. So looking forward to celebrating with the individuals who help make Springwater so great. So looking forward to that. And also the CP holiday train. Did you want to speak?
Yes, CP Holiday Train, as a matter of fact, we got some information today, November 29th, 12:15, over right at the crossing on 26, which is right at Ann Street North. They have a great concert going on, and I know Colin James is one, and who's the other? Emma King? Anyway, they always have great entertainment, and they do a half-hour live concert. You know, they have it down to a fine routine. And of course, if you come out, the only thing we'd like you to bring is donations to the food bank for both the Barrie District, because they service south of Horseshoe Valley Road, and the Elmville District Food Bank, because they service north of that. And there are a lot of users of the Elmville District Food Bank. Sometimes people think that, you know, everything's okay. It's not. So if you're coming out to see the great entertainment, please bring a food donation and get there early, because there's not a lot of parking. And I would suggest if you're going to come there, because they arrive right on time and start the concert right on time and move along. So I'd suggest you be there by 11:30 if anybody's out there. Councillor Anna?
Thank you, Mayor. In the past, we've allowed people to park here, and there's been a shuttle service provided from here over. Will that be happening again?
I don't recall a shuttle service in recent couple of years. CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Hanna. I don't have the information before, but yes, we have had that before. So I will get that information not only to council, but to our residents.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. Last year you had spoke to an opportunity that was presented from CP to ride on the rail. They offered the municipal opportunity. I was just wondering if that was offered again this year.
They will kind of take names from the municipality if you want to ride on the train. You know, they have probably, 40 seats maybe on the, so you can do that through Nicole or Karen, because they're the direct communication with CP Rail. They don't take it online. As a matter of fact, they specifically, today's announcement is not available to the public, and basically people that are associated with the municipality are certainly welcome to on board, but there are a limited number of tickets, and if you want them, you'd need to apply soon. Councillor Coghlan?
Sorry, through that, last year it was yourself and members of your family, and they gave us 4 tickets, and I was just curious if that opportunity was presented to council again this year.
I think last year it was actually you asked for them, we got them. That's how I got them. They weren't just given to me. I requested them.
So I put in a request 2 months ago, so I should be hearing back on that, or how does that work?
Yes, yes, and they've come through typically Nicole and Karen. That's where I got the confirmation.
So you've
Last year.
you've received confirmation?
No, I have not. No.
Okay,
No.
okay, thank you.
Councillor McConkey?
I'd just like clarity on that. In the past, it's always been the mayor that has ridden the train, and so I didn't even know that there was an opportunity for anybody else to ride. So that's something new that I've just heard. So I wouldn't even know where you join it.
As a matter of fact, last year was the first year I found out too. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and basically what they do is you can travel either from, I think it's down in Vaughan, to here, or from here to MacTier. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, no, as a matter of fact, I'll gather more information and just share it with council. Yeah, sure. Yeah, as a friend, it wasn't until last year. I went there for 2 years of concert, didn't realize that got, yeah. Last year was the first one someone mentioned it. Anyway, maybe the ridership was under more control, I'm not sure. Any other kind of comments or municipal updates from anybody? Okay, seeing none, we do have some motions to which notice has been given. And we have one here moved by Coghlan, and we need a seconder to get it on the table, but it'll read, the staff be directed to provide a report outlining the construction and costs of a covered community skating pavilion at the Anton Mills Community Park. So can I have a seconder for that? Austin? Open to questions? Okay, no questions, all those in favor? Carried. And I have another motion presented by Coghlan and need a seconder, and it'll read, the staff be directed to seek the potential of private-public partnership regarding the township's future plans for a multi-use recreation facility. Seconder? No. Okay, seeing no seconder, let's withdraw it. Madam Clerk? Okay. Actually, I'll allow the clerk to comment first.
So the rules for a notice of motion are, if it's presented on the agenda the first time and it doesn't progress, it automatically goes to the next agenda. If at that time it doesn't progress, then it's dropped. So if there's no seconder this time, it will show up on the next agenda. Once again, if there's no seconder, then it's dropped. But no debate can happen until a seconder.
No discussion. Okay, so, all right, we'll leave it at that. Okay. No. Yeah. Okay, and I have a resolution here, moved by Hannah, and I'll give you an idea what it's going to say. The council directs staff to explore options, report on any initiatives with recommendations on what policies may be implemented by the township of Springwater to encourage builders, developers to offer in-home sprinkler systems as a safety upgrade to purchasers. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. So we can discuss that. I think we had good discussion on it before. If there's more discussion, Councilor Hannah.
I'd just like to add that I've received a number of complimentary calls for the township's initiative on this, but the only question I've asked that I couldn't answer, excuse me, is what the cost would be. But people are willing to pay extra if it's reasonable to protect their families.
And hopefully that'll be all part of the report when it comes back. So those in favor? Carried. So do we have any new notices of motion? Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Finch. I'll try this, and we can tweak it accordingly. Notice of motion that a golf committee be formed for holding the Springwater Swing 2018 with involvement of the mayor and councillors as they desire with staff, and the committee bring forward to council options and recommendations with respect to location of the tournament.
That's good, and maybe just leave some blanks when the motion comes, because we'll fill them in, and it will have to be restricted to 2 members of council, because it's going to come to council, so, you know, just so you know. Okay?
So can you just repeat the part about it needs to be restricted to 2 members of council?
Well, sorry, 3, 2
3,
more.
including yourself.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
myself and 2 more, because we don't want to have quorum on it, that's all I'm saying, yep. Any other notice of motion? Okay, seeing none. Any new items for future consideration? Councilor Hannah.
Not an item, just a question back to my suggestion about we generate correspondence to the ministry about extending 427 versus widening the 400. Am I supposed to make a motion on that, or is that just being automatically looked after as a result of that?
No, we covered it when we pulled that item. Remember, we added that to it? But we still need the information that we can send off.
Thank you, I just wanted to overlook something I was supposed to do and get in trouble.
No, you wouldn't get in trouble, but you might miss the opportunity. So right now, we're working on it. If it was a notice of motion, we really wouldn't be working on it until after the next council meeting, so we're ahead of the game. Oh, no, because we've already dealt with that. Any other items for future consideration? Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. And I don't know if just on the CP holiday train, if staff can get back to us on how that process has taken place. Mayor French spoke to it last year, and it's something that I would love to take my children on.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Coghlan. I've already emailed staff on both questions related to the shuttle, as well as the availability of tickets and that process, so I should have something to you first thing in the morning.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, I need a mover and a seconder for the bylaws. Conkey, Hannah? That the bylaws listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. The confirmatory bylaw, and mover and a seconder. Coghlan and Hannah. The bylaw 2017-094 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council, the regular meeting held on November 15, 2017, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. So Perry, do you want this one?
I want to keep going.
Oh. Do you want to, a move to extend? A move to extend? Anyway, I can have a mover and a second for the adjournment. Austin and Coghlan. That the regular meeting of the Township of Spring River is now adjourned at 8:55 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on December 6, 2017 at 6:30 p.m. in Council Chambers Administrative Center, Minising. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Meeting adjourned, and thank you for anyone that was following us at home. Come back on at our budget meetings in November.